the safest path is still building everything with clicks and flows before we ever write code.
Actually, the first thing now is drafting the exact prompt that powers the AI agent, then wiring flow around it.
So the prompt becomes the blueprint, not the flow diagram.
Exactly. Prompt versioning, LLM arbitration, and data grounding are the new billable services our clients demand.
Welcome to another deep dive here on CRM position. So let's unpack that cold open right away, because what we just laid out there completely flips the entire ecosystem on its head.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, for years, the absolute gold standard in our space was that declarative first approach. You map out your flow, you do your point and click configuration, test the logic, and that's your foundation.
Right, that was the bedrock of every project.
Exactly. But now we're seeing this total reversal. You define the business outcome first, you carefully craft the prompt to drive the AI agent, and only then do you use flow as just the execution engine to carry out the intent of that prompt.
It's a massive shift. And, what's so fascinating to me is that this isn't just some quirky new way to build software. It is actively rewriting how consultancies make money.
Oh, completely.
We're moving entirely away from traditional implementation fees. The market is basically pivoting toward this new model being called agent orchestration as a service. Enterprises are signing these entirely new, separately billed agreements that explicitly cover things like runtime governance, cross-vendor model selection, and prompt versioning.
Right. And to really understand why clients are suddenly paying for, orchestration as a service, we need to get out of the high-level marketing slides and actually look under the hood.
Definitely.
How does this work in the wild? Because the official documentation talks a lot about data grounding, but let's break down what that actually means mechanically. In the old days, if an application needed data, you just wrote a standard database query and that was it.
Yeah, but you can't just send a raw text string and a traditional SQL query over to a large language model and expect an enterprise-grade result. I mean, it completely lacks semantic understanding.
Right, it just sees text.
Exactly. So before an AI agent can execute any prompt, it absolutely must query what's called a context cache. And this cache is built directly on Data Cloud.
Okay, wait, so it's not just pulling a static record on the fly?
No, not at all. It effectively pre-packages the specific record-level context. So say a customer's entire transaction history, their current service tier, their sentiment score. It pulls all of that before the request ever even hits the AI.
So it's basically anchoring the AI's logic in the rigid reality of your actual CRM data.
Right. It prevents the model from just guessing or, hallucinating an answer because it has this perfectly curated, vectorized memory cache to draw from first.
Oh, wow. That makes sense. It's a strict mechanical prerequisite now for any agent rollout.
Precisely. And because of this, data modeling has suddenly become like the premier consultant skill. If you don't know how to design and maintain that underlying data cloud architecture, your AI agents will just starve. Or worse, they'll make decisions based on entirely irrelevant data.
Yeah, and here is where the architecture gets incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Because looking at our field notes for this deep dive, we aren't just talking about feeding data to one monolithic AI model.
Right, there's a whole new layer.
Exactly. There's this completely new design pattern that you won't find in standard admin playbooks, which is the LLM selector flow. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so this is where we move from basic implementation into true orchestration. Partners are now actively building these cross-vendor LLM arbitration pipelines.
Arbitration pipelines, that sounds intense.
It is. They're creating these intricate routing flows that take a user's prompt and intelligently decide which language model is best suited to handle it at that exact millisecond.
So, practically speaking, how does a routing decision actually get made? Like, why wouldn't you just use one model for everything to save on the integration headache?
Well, it really comes down to a mix of cost, latency, and specific capabilities. So, for example, your selector flow might receive a request that requires highly empathetic customer communication, right?
Okay.
The flow evaluates that request and routes it to Anthropic Claude because Claude historically excels at nuanced creative synthesis. But then it takes Claude's drafted response and routes it over to Microsoft Copilot.
Wait, it hands off the draft between them.
Exactly. It routes it to Copilot because Copilot is specifically instructed to perform compliance-focused actions based on real-time corporate policy checks.
Oh, I love this because it completely changes our understanding of the toolkit. I mean, it sounds like Flow is no longer the architect of the house. Flow is just the plumbing.
Yes, exactly.
The prompt is the actual architecture, right? It's the blueprint defining what the house looks like. And that LLM selector is basically the municipal water grid. intelligently deciding which reservoir of intelligence to pull from at any given moment.
That analogy is spot on. But keeping with that water grid metaphor, we have to issue a pretty serious warning here.
Mm.
When you start wiring up multiple, highly pressurized reservoirs of intelligence, the pressure can easily blow the pipes apart. When enterprise teams get this new architecture wrong, the damage is just catastrophic.
Which brings us directly to the failure modes we've been analyzing. Because as we look through these live enterprise cases, these are not your typical, oops, a custom field didn't update kind of errors. The stakes are astronomically higher now.
So much higher.
We're seeing 3 highly specific failure modes that are completely changing architectural decisions. Let's look at the first one, which is essentially a regulatory time bomb.
Yeah, this one definitely keeps compliance officers awake at night. It centers around unmonitored prompt drift.
See, the models aren't static. Their outputs can subtly shift over time based on new system instructions or, context window overflows. In this one scenario we reviewed, an organization relies on a prompt health dashboard to monitor what the AI is saying, but the dashboard is misconfigured.
And it misses something critical.
Exactly. It fails to flag language that violates the EU GDPR, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation.
And because it's not flagged, the agent just keeps interacting with live customers.
Right. The agent drifts. It starts inadvertently leaking personal data or making unauthorized guarantees in its chat interfaces. And because the dashboard missed the drift, the organization is suddenly facing multi-million euro fines.
Oh, wow. So that is a massive compliance nightmare. But let's look at the actual routing mechanics, because earlier you mentioned chaining different models together.
Yeah, the arbitration.
Right. What happens when 2 language models disagree? That brings us to the second failure mode, the arbitration deadlock. This is a wild one. You have your agents communicating across different language models in that selector pipeline. But what happens when the validation logic loops? Because these are conversational interfaces, right? They don't just throw a clean syntax error.
So they actually talk to each other.
Yes. Agent A asks Agent B for an account verification. Agent B responds that it needs security clearance from Agent A to provide it. Agent A replies that it needs the verification to grant the clearance.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, they get stuck in this conversational deadlock, endlessly waiting on each other's confirmation. It completely stalls high-volume case creation, sometimes for minutes at a time, all while the compute meter is just spinning and spinning.
That is wild.
Yeah.
They basically get into a polite professional argument while the actual customer just sits on hold.
Exactly.
Which ties directly into the third failure mode, going back to that data cloud context cache we discussed, the schema migration catastrophe.
Right. Schema migrations are a totally routine part of CRM maintenance. You deprecate old fields, you introduce new objects, whatever. But what if your grounding caches go stale?
Okay, yeah.
If the context cache isn't strictly updated alongside the database migration, the AI agent's semantic memory still thinks the old architecture exists.
Right, hold on. Let me interrupt and push back for a second here. Because I've built 100 point-to-point integrations in my career, and we've dealt with bad data mapping before, right?
Sure.
When a declarative flow or a static API tries to hit a deprecated field, it just fails. It drops the payload, logs an error code, and, we just fix it on Monday. Aren't we just talking about basic integration failures here?
That is a really common and honestly very dangerous assumption, and it perfectly highlights the fundamental difference between declarative logic and generative AI. Static iterations do exactly what you just said. They fail and they stop.
Right.
But AI agents are active. They don't stop.
Oh.
If an AI agent hits a deprecated field and gets an unexpected result, it actively synthesizes that result. It makes an assumption to bypass the block, and then it executes subsequent downstream actions based on that stale data.
Wait, so it just improvises?
Yes. It might try to map the data to a different, totally inappropriate field, or just hallucinate a value to keep the process moving. It compounds the error exponentially in real time. It actively corrupts your reporting dashboards and forces incredibly costly database rollbacks. The blast radius of an AI failure is vastly larger than a standard declarative bug.
Wow. Okay. So AI tries to helpfully fix the integration error itself, and in doing so, basically sets the database on fire.
Precisely.
And because that blast radius is so huge, you absolutely cannot rely on ad hoc project management anymore. I mean, a loose Jira board and a weekly check-in isn't going to cut it. It makes total sense why consultancies are realizing they need a rigid, uncompromising operational matrix to govern these things.
They absolutely do. And this is why the most successful partners right now are adopting a concrete RACI framework defining exactly who, is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed at every single layer of this AI architecture.
Let's break down those 4 steps. Because looking at the framework, it starts with the absolute foundation, standardization and versioning. And this requires a completely distinct, dedicated role.
It does. You now have a prompt engineer lead.
Right.
And this isn't just a developer doing prompt tuning on the side. This person strictly owns all prompt engineering standards, the version control of those prompts, and critically, they report directly to the partner managing director.
So it's a major leadership role.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, the legal team and data architects are consulted, but the prompt engineer lead is ultimately responsible for the blueprint.
Okay, so once that blueprint is set, step 2 is that the actual plumbing has to be built. The ownership of that LLM selector orchestration pipeline, the water grid, basically falls to the integration architect.
Right.
And what really stood out to me in the field notes is the political dynamic here. The integration architect is accountable to the solution delivery lead for making sure Claude and Copilot talk to each other without getting into those deadlocks. But the client's internal CTO, they are merely informed.
That's a huge point.
Right. The external integration architect strictly owns the build because the specialized knowledge required to route these prompts is just so incredibly niche.
It is a massive shift in control. But once that pipeline is built, step 3 is you have to deploy the guardrails. You can't just let the water run wild. This introduces another entirely new role into the ecosystem, the AI ops engineer.
Right, because someone has to watch the meters.
Exactly. Their strict responsibility is deploying and maintaining those prompt health dashboards. They are building flows. They are monitoring token usage spikes to ensure you aren't blowing through your entire budget in an afternoon.
Yeah.
They are tracking hallucination rates. They're watching for those EU GDPR compliance flags. If the agent starts drifting, it is the AI ops engineer's job to catch it on the dashboard and cut the circuit before it becomes a multi-million-dollar regulatory disaster.
And you can't just set it and forget it, which brings us to step 4. The continuous audit. The prompt engineer lead has to step back in on a scheduled basis to run aggressive prompt audits and implement drift remediation. And they don't just self-report, right? They are held strictly accountable by a governance council chair.
It requires relentless, continuous oversight. The AI is a moving target, constantly.
Looking at this structure, prompt engineer leads reporting to managing directors, AI ops engineers watching token meters, governance council chairs. I mean, it sounds way less like a traditional software deployment team. It sounds exactly like setting up an air traffic control tower.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
You have highly specialized operators monitoring radar screens, checking vectors, and constantly course-correcting planes that are already up in the air.
Yeah. And implementing this air traffic control framework isn't just a slight operational tweak. It requires a totally different type of talent, a different type of certification, and honestly, a completely revised way of charging the client for the work.
So let's talk about what this means for you listening right now. What has to change in your architecture, your team structures, and your long-term roadmap? Because the internal surveys from the 2025 Partner Summit revealed a statistic that is basically sending shockwaves through the community. According to the data, the era of the certified Salesforce admin is effectively coming to a close.
It's a highly controversial industry perspective, and I know it's a painful one for many veterans to hear, but the numbers are just undeniable. According to those surveys, 30% of senior architects now list prompt engineer as their primary day-to-day role.
30%.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, that number was only 5% back in 2023.
That is a staggering reallocation of talent, and it raises a huge question. What happens to the traditional admins? The data shows they're essentially being rapidly retrained and reassigned to these new AI ops squads. They're moving from building declarative logic to monitoring dashboard alerts.
They are, and this talent drain comes with immense systemic risks. It's drastically shrinking the pool of resources available for pure declarative maintenance. We are seeing a very real, rising risk of neglected organizational hygiene.
Right.
Basic technical debt is just being ignored because everyone is focused on the AI. In fact, the demand for prompt expertise is so overwhelming right now that traditional implementation firms lacking in-house prompt talent are being acquired by boutique consultancies that specialize exclusively in prompt engineering.
And the market is formally validating this shift, too.
Yep.
In Q2 of 2025, we saw the introduction of the new Salesforce Prompt Engineer credential. And this is not some multiple-choice vanity badge.
No, not at all.
Earning it requires submitting actual proof of auditability frameworks and demonstrating mastery of data cloud grounding. And partners who can actually staff these certified engineers, they're commanding a 15 to 20% premium on their project proposals.
It is a massive, clear signal. The market is highly willing to pay a premium for proven, governed AI expertise. But at the flip side of that coin, it's pretty brutal. The projections show that consulting companies stubbornly marketing admin-only services are expected to see their win rates plummet below 10% within the next 2 years. Enterprise clients are demanding measurable AI outcomes now, not just declarative configurations.
Speaking of outcomes, the entire pricing model is being restructured around this air traffic control concept. We are seeing a massive departure from traditional time and materials billing. Contracts are shifting heavily to outcome-based structures, so a consultancy's billing might be tied directly to achieving key performance indicators like, a guaranteed reduction in average case resolution time.
Right. It totally redefines how you calculate margins. But what is even more disruptive is the recent change in ISV agreements. For those unfamiliar, an ISV is an independent software vendor that partners building apps on the platform. The new contracts are actually allowing these partners to earn a percentage of the per-call AI token spent.
Wait, really? A true revenue share model on compute cost?
Exactly. It financially rewards partners who can develop high-volume, highly optimized prompt libraries that are called constantly by the client system. It's a recurring revenue stream based entirely on AI usage, rather than just cashing a check for a one-off project implementation.
Okay, let's look at the math on this, though, because I see a massive discrepancy here. If we are shifting away from hourly billing, how do consultancies actually cover the skyrocketing overhead of this new architecture? Because looking at the official documentation, the total cost of ownership, the TCO for an enterprise, is up by roughly 25%.
Yeah, the TCO is definitely up.
Right. You have to pay to maintain external LLM APIs, you have to license secret management vaults to protect the data, and you have to run these massive observability platforms just to power the prompt health dashboards. How do you absorb a 25% bump in overhead?
Well, you are absolutely right to call out the tool integration complexity. It is multiplied.
Yeah.
But that 25% TCO bump is exactly why those new billable services we talked about at the top of the deep dive are mandatory. Partners offset that massive cost by selling monitoring as a service and agent orchestration as a service. You don't just build the AI and walk away. You charge a hefty recurring monthly fee to act as that air traffic control tower. You monitor the prompt health dashboards, you manage the cross-LLM arbitration pipelines, and you run the continuous audits. That recurring service revenue is how the new financial ecosystem balances out.
Wow. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from the water grid of LM selectors to the regulatory time bombs of prompt drift, and finally the new operational frameworks required to survive this whole shift. To make this actionable, we want to distill this down to 3 concrete steps you can take this week based on the documentation we've unpacked. Action number 1, audit your project pipeline, look at the very next deployment your team is gearing up for, and ask them point blank, are we defining the flow diagram first, or are we drafting the prompt first?
Action number 2, validate your data grounding mechanics. Look closely at your current or planned AI initiatives. Do they have a robust context cache actively built on Data Cloud? Or are your agents effectively flying blind, risking those catastrophic schema migration errors where the AI tries to write to a database that no longer exists?
And action number 3, review your master services agreements, your MSAs. Take a hard look at your pricing strategy to see if you are leaving money on the table. Are you offering agent orchestration as a service to cover your overhead? Are you exploring these per-token revenue share models? Because you have to update your pricing to match the new total cost of ownership realities.
We also want to leave you with one critical question to reflect on. We aren't looking to debate this. Just consider it honestly in the context of your own organization's roadmap. If your firm's admin-only service win rates drop below 10% in the next 2 years, what exactly is your core competency today?
That is a heavy existential question for a lot of teams.
It is the reality of the market. And, if you need to understand how CRM and AI platforms actually work under the hood, hear complex topics broken down without the vendor hype, and stay ahead of real architectural shifts rather than just following marketing narratives, subscribe to the CRM Position podcast.
Because the landscape is changing faster than the documentation can keep up. Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over. If AI agents are already the primary users of our declarative flows, interpreting logic and executing steps, how long until the prompt itself realizes the flow diagram is inefficient and demands the architectural permission to rewrite the metadata to optimize its own token usage? When the AI becomes the integration architect who audits the auditor. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.